continue on. So go back, close your eyes, breathe a couple moments. What I was saying from my own practical experience, I still have a tough time reducing the number of thoughts that are crossing my mind when I'm meditating. I do my best to not pay attention to them, but I still have those moments where they just keep coming at me. Something that I learned a long time ago in my breathing is I learned basically by observing my breathing. Probably a lot of you. So my practice is I breathe in. In the beginning, I did it to the count of 4. And then breathe out to either the count of 7 or 8, depending on whose school you went to. So I breathe in 4, breathe out 8. And I would make myself aware of my breathing. I wouldn't necessarily count the breaths anymore, but I would breathe in. And maybe I would say a little mantra of breathing in, like detach, and then breathe out. While I'm on my in-breath or my out-breath, I'm paying attention to my breathing. And I notice even when I'm paying attention to my breathing, there are still some thoughts coming in, but of course, I have one big, huge thought going on, which is I'm breathing. So it's an improvement, but it's not where I want it to be. And this came about when I was in India, back in 2012. What I started doing was I would take an in-breath. Very naturally, I would hold it for a few moments. And then I would exhale very easily, very naturally. And at the end of the exhale, and I don't exhale more than what's a natural feeling. At the end of the exhale, I just pause. And I found myself pausing for about 30 seconds. And then I would I let my body breathe again when it wanted. It will tell me. It will tell you when you need to breathe. You don't have to orchestrate. So what I found is I would breathe in for 4 seconds. I'd pause between the in-breath and the out-breath for a few seconds, 4 or 5 seconds. I'd exhale for 8 seconds. And then I just completely relax and stop breathing. And wait until my body said, breathe in again. So I had this cycle going. Breathe in, pause. Breathe out, pause. Breathe in, pause. Breathe out, pause. And what I discovered was, in those pauses, I wasn't thinking. After the out breath, or maybe a 30-second pause, you would take an amount of time. I don't measure it, so maybe it was 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. It was the one place where I was free of thinking. Not only were I ignoring them, just letting them pass through my head, they weren't coming in. And this relates very well if you listen to the teachings. They'll say, you are in the pauses between what you say, between what you hear, between what you think. When you're in that pause, you are. Which is one reason why we have such trouble knowing who we are, because there's never a pause. If we stop talking, we're thinking about what we're going to say next. If we stop thinking, listening, we're thinking, what am I going to say in response? Even in English, I don't know if whoever coined this phrase knew what they were really talking about. But in English, we have a very famous saying is read between the lines. Read in the pause. Be aware of the pause. That's where you show up. Reading is great because you can bring it down to one thought, breathing in, or one thought, breathing out. But it's still a thought. So breathe in, pause. Be aware of the pause. Don't force it. Don't resist thoughts. Just find yourself how long it takes before a thought creeps into that pause. When you exhale, do it again, but do it for as long as you comfortably cannot breathe. Don't hold your breath. Don't force an exhale. Just relax. When your body wants to breathe, you breathe. When your body wants to stop, you stop. But check out in that pause how long you can go before you start thinking, or before you become focused on the stray thoughts that are coming through. So let's try it for just 5 minutes now. So, could you hear my explanation of the inhale, the exhale, and the gaps in between? Yes, no? Okay, so close your eyes, put your feet on the floor, or if you're sitting on the ground, just sit as you are. So take a few breaths in. Pause. Exhale. Naturally pause. Pause as long as is comfortable for you. And when you feel like breathing, let your body breathe. It's under its own control. So breathe in, pause, breathe out, long pause. Just keep going. I'm not going to direct you. Do it at your own pace. When you're in those pauses, see if your mind is still for 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. See how long it is before the thoughts come again and before you start paying attention to the thoughts. If the thoughts come in, go to your center. Don't be bothered by the thoughts. Try to go deeper into your own being, deeper into the stillness, the calmness. See if that helps. Just breathe, pause, exhale, pause. Keep breathing for a few more minutes. Keep breathing. One more minute. Keep breathing. Keep your eyes closed. And I'm going to say a few words for a few minutes. Just listen to me from a place of meditation, from quiet and stillness. And as you listen to my voice, keep breathing. One more minute. As you listen to my voice, find the I thought who is thinking. I am hearing He's voice. Find the I thought who is thinking. I am hearing. Find the I thought. I am. Can you locate I? Does I have an existence? Or is I just one more thought? You may define I as in your head, but can you find where in your head it's at? If you say it is someplace in your brain, where is that I? Where does I show up? You can't find I in your brain either. You can't even know where I originates. You can only tell stories about it, ego stories. Truth is, you can't identify where or what I is. It's impossible to find the I that had the thought I, because that I is emptiness. And there is no experience of emptiness. In emptiness, there is no experiencer and no object of experience. There is no sensation, no perception, no feeling, and no memory. So you can't know. How then Do you know that there is anything worthwhile to emptiness? To I am. Is emptiness dead? Is it nothing at all? Am I nothing? If that was possible, who would want to become awakened if that's all you would find? So how can you be sure that there is bliss in emptiness and that there is you? You can't truthfully say emptiness is love, emptiness is peace, emptiness is happiness, emptiness is me. Those are only thoughts, just wishful thoughts. So how then So how do you know all this seeking is worth it? You know by coming back to the world that is both emptiness and not emptiness, through the body's attributes of sensation, perception, thinking, feeling, and remembering. You know. You know when you are aware, right here in this world. When you wake from a good night's sleep, how do you feel? I feel good. I feel happy. I feel blissful. When you come out of a good meditation, how do you feel? I feel peaceful. I feel whole. When you lose yourself in giving to another person, solely in service to them, how do you feel? I feel love. Those are your glimpses of emptiness. It's not someplace far off, beyond your direct experience. Those are your answers. Those are your awareness of you. Those are your teachers. When you are still, when you are in deep silence, when you are free from all your thoughts, you are emptiness. In a non-empty world, you have always known who you are, but you've been trying to know it through thought, and it's a trap. Every mind tries to know that which it cannot know. That's the human condition. The world appears for one reason, for you to know who am I. That all your conditioned thinking has prevented you from seeing the truth you seek. The world is the window you're trying to see through now. But wherever you look, it's covered in thoughts. Your whole life, you've been trying to clean the world so you can know. Try clean the window, not the world. Keep breathing. Inhale, pause. Exhale, pause. As long as you comfortably can. Are you free of thoughts for a little bit? No stress. If you're not now, just keep practicing this. Look between the breaths. That's the place you'll find peace. That's the place you'll find you. That's the place where thoughts will bother you. When you're ready, bring yourself back to Zoom, open your eyes, and we'll continue. Take your time. We have another 30 seconds to come back, and then I want to continue. Since I can't see some of your faces, I have no idea if you're back with us, but still in meditation. How was the experience of breathing and observing the gap between your breaths? Did you have a cessation or less thoughts? Feel free, anybody who wants to share, feel free to share. I leave it up, you can unmute yourself at random and talk, just don't talk over somebody else. Anybody?
I'm gonna talk. Yes, it's very, very helpful. When I meditate, I have the tendency to overthink the fact that I don't have to think. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. That's the trap.
And so even if I'm not thinking about anything like something literal, I am still thinking about not thinking. So this kind of pausing tip is great, because I was just focusing on breathing, because pausing was part of the breathing process. So that was a great tip. Thank you.
You're welcome. Pause is doing nothing. Breathing is doing something.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're trained to think whenever we're engaged in anything. Right? That's when we're in deep sleep, we don't think, right? We're pausing. When we're in dream state, we're thinking like crazy, but we're using our dream to do the thinking for us. When we're in the awakened state, we're thinking almost nonstop. But all the teachings, whether it's your breath, whether it's reading, listening to a speaker, whether it's your heartbeat, they say, observe the pauses. That's where the magic is. That's where the mysticism is. That's where you show up. It helped me tremendously. Maria, I was like you. I was thinking, okay, how long haven't I had a thought? That's a thought.
Yeah.
We sabotage.
Yeah.
Right? Because we want to measure, we want to define everything, because that's the way that we're trained in life. The gap is like a timeout.
Another
Yeah.
problem, and sorry, another problem I have is my heartbeat. So I think I'm just not used to listening to my heartbeat, because we're all busy doing things every day. So we never really stop and go like, oh, I want to hear my heartbeat. No one does that.
Yeah.
So when I meditate, it's like the only time that I get to actually like not even hear it, but feel it, like feel the beat. And so I think it's like some sort of thing that happens in my mind. And when I'm meditating, I feel like my heartbeat is like going super fast. And I start to be like, I feel like I need to touch it and put my hand here and just calm myself down. And that helps me a lot too. But I don't know. I think it's just one of those things that happens to me with my heartbeat. I just don't know how to control that kind of, yeah.
Do you ever find a time when your heartbeat slows down?
I do. Yeah, I did today. So that was great.
So it's not like it's a medical condition. It's your heart.
Oh, no,
It
it's just,
accelerates when you're meditating.
yeah, at the beginning.
Okay. I have no idea why. And there's no rule, right? You're not breaking a rule by having your heart go fast. Right now, I wouldn't worry about it. But the same thing I would suggest is you say you feel the beat of your heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shift your
Yeah.
attention. Feel the pause between the beats. It's very powerful. I learned this same thing. I learned this in India. And I was like, there's a peace between the beats of my heart. Just like between my breaths, between my thoughts. And I really found that I could go, because I too, like I was conditioned. When I put my hand on my chest to feel my heart, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the beats. Don't look for the beats, look for the pause between the beats. Feel when it's calm. Feel when there's no heart, no beats. It's a skill. You need to train yourself to do that. But it's the same thing. You'll find peace, the calmness in between the beats. Try it. And tell me someday, practice it and tell me. You can message me and say, hey, it worked or it didn't work or whatever you want. Just share if you find that there's some result that you gain from it. Okay? Thanks for sharing. Anything else?
No.
Anybody else want to share about this? Nobody wants to share about the experience. Could everybody hear my words this time? Was I loud enough? Yes? Yep. Any experience of the words? Will you be mental? Or you're just listening to words at a deeper level? Did the words have any significance to you? Were they just silly words? Anybody want to share what your experience of the words? This is usually such a talkative group.
Slow Sunday.
It's fine. It's fine. We can move on. There's a bus that I wanted to share with you. So
once the engine is oiled, we'll get there.
No problem. I showed a picture of a bus called Suffering as the heading for this group. I want to share awareness that I had, actually, I had this image, and I had planned a Zoom session from a year and a half ago when I was doing a different group, the group that I stopped that I didn't feel really good with. And then when I came up with what I wanted to share with you today, the bus came right to my mind. So I brought it back, I changed the wording a little bit to make it fit today. Everybody who's here, everybody who meditates, prays, who chants, who's doing this work of finding out who they are, is suffering. Not necessarily catastrophic. Suffering is disappointment, is not getting what you want, is having a loved one pass away. Suffering comes in all different degrees. I'm using the word generic. And if we're here, we want to know either why we suffer or how we stop suffering, how we can end the suffering. The bus was a really good symbol for me that humanity, we didn't even buy the ticket. Some stranger we didn't even know, we had no reason to even trust, gave us a ticket, put it in our hand and said, get on this bus, this is life, do it. This bus takes you where you want to go. It will show you everything you need to do, everything you need to know. And we ride the bus. And we suffer. First off, I want to say that suffering in itself is not a bad thing. Suffering is our teacher. Through suffering, we become aware of what's not working. So to just get rid of suffering completely is not a wise thing. It's great if you want to, as in the Matrix, take the blue pill and just get on with life. But if you want to take the red pill and wake up, suffering is the path. Suffering is what brings us to the work. Happiness, contentment doesn't bring us to the work. There's something more, and that's what we find in suffering. The problem with suffering is that we suffer because we suffer. We compound the problem of suffering by being ill at ease with the suffering. We lose any focus we may have in the suffering. In order to learn from suffering, we need to be able to step back and become the observer of the suffering. But for many of us, the suffering is so intense, so non-stop, that it's really difficult to be the observer and step back and look at what the suffering is teaching us, or trying to teach us. Now, one thing is we can sit and meditate, and we can try to go back into the silence, into the stillness, to observe our suffering. Meditation is a great way to do that. The proper use of yoga is a great way to do that. Chanting and prayer is a great way to do that. But there's also a very practical way. That's why I use the bus as the example. The bus is very practical. It's very, very much of this world. And our suffering is very much of this world. And there's a technique. I won't see a technique. There's a knowing. There's a knowledge that can help us separate ourselves from the suffering enough to be able to let it be our teacher and learn from it. when I was living in the cave, maybe a year and a half ago, when it's a nice night, I sleep outside in a hammock between the trees. And one of the things I really loved about being in the jungle, sitting still, is you can hear the weather from far away. You can hear when it's raining, and you can hear as the rain approaches. Because you can hear the rain falling on the leaves of the trees. And there are so many trees that the sound is quite noticeable. And you can hear it moving closer, 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 getting louder, louder, louder. Same thing with the wind. I could hear when a storm was coming because I could hear the wind slowly picking up. And I could hear it far off in the distance. And I could hear where it was. And I could just observe it coming closer and closer and closer. And at one point, I said to myself, wow, isn't this beautiful? Listen to the wind blowing through the trees. It's a very peaceful, even with a storm approaching, it's still a very peaceful awareness. And then I stopped myself and wait a minute. Can I hear the wind? And it's a question for you. Can you hear the wind? Anybody think they can hear the wind? I don't see anybody else. So, Tim, thank you for being the witness that I know. Somebody said, yes, I can hear the wind. Lynn, everybody else is thumbs up. And okay, good.
Yep.
Think about it. What do you hear when you hear the wind? Do you hear the wind? Do you hear the air moving? Is it possible?
Do we hear it moving other things?
Ah, brilliant. When I hear the wind blowing in the jungle, I don't hear the wind. I hear the air current rubbing against the leaves of the tree. I hear the bamboo bending and making noise. But mostly when I hear the wind, what I'm hearing is the airflow rubbing against the leaves, rubbing against the rocks of the mountain. But I don't hear the wind. You following so far? Makes sense? If you disagree, let me know. Otherwise, just go with me on this. I don't hear the rain. I hear the rain when it hits an object. I hear the rain on a more fine basis. When the rain interacts with the wind, I can hear that. But can I hear the rain itself? If it was raining in a vacuum, would I hear it? And there were no objects in the vacuum? I wouldn't hear it. If, I'm making this up, if the wind could be blowing in a vacuum with no objects, no atoms, no molecules, could I hear the wind no matter how fast it was? I couldn't hear it. I hear the wind, I hear the rain because they're interacting with something else. And it's not that I hear the rain and I hear the leaf of the tree. I don't actually hear a leaf and I don't actually hear the wind. So what do I hear? I hear the rubbing between the wind and the leaf. That's called friction, right? So what I'm really hearing is the friction between the wind and the leaf of the tree. When I became aware of what I really was experiencing, I was experiencing the vibrations of friction. In that moment of shifting my awareness to, wow, what I really hear is friction. A light went off. And I said, my God, this is my life. From the Big Bang, which was friction, and the Big Bang happened, right? All the molecule, the atoms, everything split, created an enormous friction, an enormous energy. Coming down to Earth, and you and me, we're all adults, so I can talk about this without having to be politically correct. Right? How did you and I get here? We got here from friction. The friction of your father, the male organ of sex, and the friction in your mother of the female organ of sex is what caused you to be here. Without that friction, there'd be nothing. Without that friction, you wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be there. And every engagement, every activity we have in the world, whether it's with another person, whether it's with an object, and whether it's with our thinking and our feeling, creates friction. And every bit of our suffering is caused by friction. Something is happening to me, and I don't like it. I don't like the feeling. I don't like the friction that's going on between the object or the activity and me. I suffer from the sensation of this friction, physically, emotionally, and mentally. It's all there is. We label the friction as something. We label the object as something. But the problem is the friction that's created when we're not in accord with life. When we want a different kind of friction, because joy is friction too. But right now we're talking about suffering. You see where I'm going so far with this?
If the wind creates friction on us, does that mean that, like, do we have to realize that we are the vacuum?
A vacuum is just a hypothetical. No, you are you. All of what I'm talking about is in this world, this dualistic world right now. This is not, we're stuck in dualism. We're not talking about that part of us in the non-dual world. Because it's not engaged in this world. In fact, we've hidden it with all of our conditioning that we talked about before, right? I'm talking about the conditioned being that appears in this world as Nick or Lynn or Maria or me. Got it? When I realized that what I was hearing wasn't the wind, I was hearing the friction between the wind and the leaves, I saw my entire life is that same way. The universe is that same way. Vibrations are friction. They're modulations, they're motion. Motion in space creates friction. Even though space looks empty, motion in space creates friction. There's nothing in our universe that happens. Even breathing is a happening. Even a molecule moving is a happening. There's nothing in our universe that doesn't cause friction, including our thinking. In that moment, what I became aware of, if I want to lessen my suffering, I need to cut out some friction. I need to stop being the vehicle, the object that counters another object to cause friction. When we're the observer, we remove ourselves and we can watch and we can choose. But the body, my emotions, my thinking, my feelings, my thoughts, my memories are all non-stop engaged in friction. So on a real simple term, if Nick is in my face telling me off, there's a lot of friction going on between Nick and I. Right? What can I do? I can back away. Whoa, get out of my space, Nick, right? What happens? The friction reduces, doesn't it? Because the more space between Nick and I, the less friction there is. When I think about this, when you're having an argument with somebody, we tend, especially in Asian cultures, we're really in each other's face, right? Personal space reduces. When we feel insecure, threatened, what happens? Wait a minute, what's going on here? When I say what's going on here, my natural response is to back away from the situation. When I'm fully invested in the situation, I just want to be right. I want to find out what's going on. I want to defend myself. I'm in Nick's space too. But when I want to know what's going on, when I want to know how to deal with this, I back away. What am I doing? High friction, I'm in Nick's space. Low friction, I back away. Maybe I walk out of the room. No friction. But every step of that process, there's friction. Now, I can say, I'm going to be calm. I'm going to remember where my feet are while I'm with Nick. I'm going to breathe while Nick is yelling at me. I'm going to try to meditate while Nick is yelling at me. It's excellent if we can do that, but that's a pretty advanced state of awareness. While we're working on that, let's work on something that's really easy to do. Get off the bus. The real name of the bus is friction, but I didn't want to give it away, so I called it suffering. The bus is friction. As long as you're in the bus, you're engaged in friction with whatever in the world that you're dealing with. Get off the damn bus. Step back. Time out. Just be aware when Nick is yelling at me and I lose myself, my ego gets wrapped up in the yelling. Why is he yelling at me? He's wrong. How dare he yell at me? Whatever my ego is saying, right? I can say, time out, ego. I don't want to analyze it. I'm going to stop the friction right now. How can I do this? I'm going to back away from Nick. Or I'm going to leave the room. I don't need to be with Nick. I'm a free person. But the most important thing I can do right now is say, stop the friction. Whatever it takes to stop the friction. One way is to walk away, use our feet, use our mobility. One way is to become the observer and say, well, Nick, I know that the reason that Nick is yelling at me really has more to do with his problem than with me. So I'm going to become the observer of Nick and the situation. The not physical me not the sensations, perceptions, feelings, thoughts, and memories, is stepping away. Same thing as physically stepping away. It reduces the friction between Nick and me. And right now, all we need to be concerned about is, one, identifying there's some really serious friction going on here that friction doesn't feel healthy to me. It doesn't feel, it lends to my peace and happiness, my growth, my safety. So why stick in it? Why defend myself? Defending, when Nick opposes me and I defend him, it's like in a football match. You create more friction. Stop defending. Stop being there. Be the observer. There are different ways to do it, but stop the friction. In whatever aspect of our life, there's a problem, there's friction, guaranteed. If it's serious, just say, how can I stop the friction right now? How can I get off this bus? When you make a little move, you might be in a safer space where at least you can then become the observer. The ideal is to become the observer and say, wait, this has nothing to do with me. This is my body interacting with another body called Nick, and the mind of Nick can be. What I'm talking about here is, while we're working on becoming skillful at being the observer, at identifying with our awareness instead of our mind body, you still can reduce your suffering a lot. Just the simple fact of realizing what this world is all about. And this world is all about friction. So the good and the bad of it is friction. The part we have problems with is what we label the bad part of friction. Step away from the friction until you're in a spot, until you're in a place where you can become the observer, you become the witness, or where you can just breathe and get in touch with the awareness that you are. When we wake up, people say, well, do I not have to deal with the world anymore? No. We just come back and we know how to deal with the world from our awareness. And part of that awareness is to say this whole world exists because of friction, nothing more. If all of a sudden all friction stopped, the universe would cease to exist, along with it, all the problems. You may not be able to go into yourself in a moment of presence and say, I am. You may not even be able to be the observer and say, I'm witnessing my body-mind interact with another body-mind or an object. But you can certainly see a way to reduce the friction. Make sense? Anybody want to comment?
Can you repeat the last thing you said? I couldn't hear, sorry.
The last thing I said before I said, anybody want to comment? The one thing that we for sure can do, anybody that has a brain, that's an adult, that has the intelligence that I know everybody in this group has, otherwise you wouldn't be in this group. We can look at the situation and say, wait a minute, how do I stop friction? Friction is the tension caused from two objects interacting with each other in opposite directions. How does that show up? It shows up because Nick wants the glass of water and I want the glass of water. We're in tension, we're creating friction. It can show up by me saying, have the glass of water, I'll go get my own. It's a really simple example. Find some way. Start with a small set to build the skill to notice the friction, because all our problems are of the world, meaning the physical, the mental, the physical, the emotional, and the mental. Find the friction. In the mental world, there's friction. In the emotional world, there's friction. In the physical world, there's friction. Find the friction. Say, why is this friction there? Somebody's not nice to me. I'm scared that I'm going to die. I'm scared that I'm going to get COVID. Friction. Emotional friction. Find the friction and just say, time out. I don't care about the spiritual world at all right now. Right now, I see what's going on. I don't like it. I'm not comfortable with it. Stop the friction. Whatever it takes, stop the friction. Got it, Maria?
Yeah.
So, comments?
Thinking back about like if someone insults you and that creates friction, like it's a good way to decrease the friction to like kind of believe that that person's conditioning is just talking to you. It's not really them. It's just their conditioning that's insulting you, so you don't have to take it personally.
Yes, that's an advanced state of stopping friction. Absolutely. The goal is to do all of the spiritual things that we're talking about. But there are times when we can't go back into that spiritual person. We're too identified.
Very true. Very true.
Right? So we throw out all the spiritual stuff. In that moment, we say, that's all bullshit. I need to deal with my survival, my health, my mental health, my emotional health. It's too big for me. Nick, absolutely. The goal is to realize what the real situation is about from a spiritual standpoint. And the non-dual teachings show us the most powerful and most direct way to do that. What I'm saying is, as much as I've been working on it for 30 plus years, I find myself at moments completely forgetting anything spiritual and just dealing with the physical environment in a very uncomfortable setting. I need some coping mechanism. Even when I'm awake,
Me as well.
remember last time I said, even when we awaken, we still need to deal with the world and we still need to deal with our personalities and our attributes. Jim was talking about my Briggs. The attitudes, the personalities that we have, we still have to deal with them. But when we're coming from awareness, it's clear how to deal with it. But when I'm in a really emotionally charged or mentally or physically charged environment, I'm going to forget all that stuff, at least for the moment that I'm there. So if I forget it, the one really easy thing, because it's still of that physical world, is friction. I see friction here. I don't see an argument with Nick. I see friction. Right away. When I see, oh my God, I'm having an argument with Nick, my defense mechanism comes up. Also, I want to prove, my ego comes up and says, I need to prove him wrong. I need to win the argument. I'm not invested egotistically in stopping the friction. What I'm saying is in the physical present moment, if you just become aware of friction, which is us, that's easier than saying, oh my God, I'm just aware of this. Oh my God, I'm just the observer. Back up. Right? It's very easy to say friction, stop the friction. That's what I'm talking about. It's a bandage. Right? But I find in my life today, I still need lots of bandages. I still have all my personality traits. I have all my insecurities. Well, hopefully a little less of them, right? But it's there. That part of me, the cuddly part of the physical, mental, and emotional, it's there. It won't go away, but it can lose its impact. When it roars like a lion, friction is the way to control it in the moment. Make sense?
Yeah, I generally have an issue. I think it's testing for me with my sisters, especially with family.
Yeah.
I easily find I lose myself so fast because family, we love each another, but I find we are our true selves, especially with siblings.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's because it's all that conditioning, growing up together, mom, dad, everyone, and then you have to deal with the inner child, and every single thing just shows up in that instant moment, and you're like, my God, where did my spirituality go? An hour later, because you're built up, you're tensed up, there's a lot of heat, your brain is like messed up, and I truly understand that. And I can see it right now, as you're saying it, like with my small sister, because we're still working on it together, but still family. But I find that's where I test myself sometimes. Yeah, I really understand what you're saying there.
The biggest, I'm not communist in any way, right? But if you really want to be honest about it, the nuclear family unit is a cause of a lot of the world's problems. Hillary Clinton, when she was running for president back in 2016, said, it takes a village to raise a child. In America, we don't say that because we're all individualists and we're very big and strong on the family, right? But the truth is yes, it takes a community. And oftentimes the worst teachers, the worst people to deal with a child is the parents. But we're stuck with it, and it's not going to go away soon. But the real beauty, the best reason for a family, a nuclear family especially, is it's where all our shit shows up. It's where we really get to know about ourselves and about our behaviors and work on ourselves. I have an older sister. I can tell you how many years I've been working on myself with her. Not working on her, I'm working on myself, right? And it still isn't, it's a lot better, but it's still not going. There are times when I say, oops, friction, time out.
I have something to add.
Sure.
Well, our bodies are fields of moving energy, but our bodies are also, systems of information. And I feel like a big part of my sorrows, to put it that way, or, just burdens or, well, suffering, comes from events that are out of my control. So not necessarily, friction that's, physically right in front of me, but rather events that are happening, miles or, even in different countries or just very, very far away, it's all that information that I have attached in my body, and it's really affecting the flow of energy in my body, all the events happening, and it's not necessarily something I can control.
I follow you. I'm with you 100%. Maria, you can say no, but could you turn your camera on while we're talking? I want to relate to, I want to look in your eyes. I want to be able to relate to you while we're sharing. Even if it is. Yeah, when I talk about friction, I don't mean just in your immediate environment. You know what's called the butterfly effect? Which is where it's a story, right? It's the idea of when a butterfly in Hoi-An flutters its wings, it affects somebody in Argentina, but we're not conscious of it. But everything has an infinite expression. So the fact that the conflict is between you in Argentina and something going on in Alaska doesn't change a thing. There's still friction. When you are struggling with it, say, what's the friction? The friction is I don't like the choices they're making in polluting the seas. Right? Just as an example. Now you know where the friction is coming from. You can stop the friction. Stop listening to them. Turn it off in your head. Listen to something else that brings you joy. The friction exists because you have an investment in what's going on in someplace else in the world. If what was going on in another place in the world made you happy, you wouldn't be suffering, would you? The friction would be of a completely different amplitude. It would be what we call positive friction, right? What we're talking about today is the negative friction. But friction is, you and I have a problem with the universe. How more non-located can that be, right? I'm going to die someday. Why? Because I have to for the universe. It needs my atoms. Right? The weak and strong nuclear forces, entropy, gravity are all working against me being here. That's like the ultimate problem. And now there's friction between me and the universe. How much more bizarre can that be? How do I stop it? Hey, I'm okay with death. Problem solved. I know that death is what's needed for birth for something else. Now I can feel noble. Okay, I die, so something else can live. Now I'm working on positive friction. But I've gotten rid of the negative friction. So no matter how far removed it may appear to you, there's still friction. And this still can work. You just may need to be a little more clever with how you identify and deal with the friction. And it still may be a more practical approach right now when you're lost and you can't get back into all your spiritual teachings. As I'm saying this, my observation is that the further removed it is, probably the easier it is for us to come in contact with the spiritual teachings, because it's not a fight or flight moment, right? My very life doesn't depend in this moment. My very safety, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional, does not depend in this moment on solving this. It's not an existential threat. So the friction's going on, it may be at a lower level. Easier for me to call up my spiritual side of me and deal with it. But I know a lot of people who can't let go of something that's going on halfway around the world. They're so righteous. They're so invested in the world looking the way they want it to look. They can't let go of that. And they're so engrossed in it that they can't even find the spiritual teachings. But they can find, if they want to, they can find the point of friction and stop that. A lot of people, they thrive on negative friction. So they don't want to get out of it. They're going to, in fact, create it. But I'm talking about the people who are healthy enough, emotionally and mentally, that the negative friction they want to stop or lessen so they can get back into their space of their spiritual beliefs, their spiritual work, get back into that state of energy, just to have the real problem dissipate. I'm talking about the physical covering of the problem in the moment when the crisis is existential, so to speak. crisis is here and now. Does that help with what you were talking about when you're talking about something, I don't know what it was, that's happening someplace else?
Yeah, it makes sense. It helps.
By the way, Maria, since this is your first session with us, I always make clear, you don't have to believe anything I'm saying. You don't have to buy into it. All I'm asking is be open-minded right now. Take it away from here. Don't immediately build a defense system against it. Meditate on it, sleep on it, and over a period of time, that time is your time, then make a choice. Yeah, it fits for me, or no, it doesn't fit for me.
Totally.
Cool. Can we take a 3-minute stop? Get some water, take a break?
Yeah.
Are we okay with that?
Yeah.
Be back with you in 3 minutes. Okay.
Always here.
Thank you for always being here. It means a lot to me. Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Experiences. Can you see it in your own life? That friction is the first layer of the problem that we need to work with, if we're talking about a negative situation.
I'm kind of visualizing it kind of like tectonic plates. Like if there's more friction, it creates more, I don't know, like pain or something.
Friction, hey, friction created the continents, right?
True.
Friction's everywhere. And there's a lot of, friction is good. It's not good or bad, right? It depends on how it fits our view of the world. But yeah, go ahead. So the tectonic plates, continue.
Oh yeah, no, just kind of visualizing like if the edges are more like I don't know, rough, it creates more friction, and I don't know, maybe we should be more smooth or something.
That's a nice. Yeah, if you are around soft ball, you can always move around very tough texture, and that's what. And so, say you are a hard object, and you are actually water, and so when you come and hit the tough object, you are basically water, so you can always become flexible and move around this tangible object, and you don't get hurt. So it look like the more like the softer and more flexible of an object you are, the less friction you can experience.
Beautiful. That's absolutely the teaching. The teachings are, when we're identified with the physical body, we're like a big tree. Just can't budge. Everything is going to hurt when it hits us, right? But when we realize who we really are, that's a very soft, your expression. Then you flow. So the less we're identified with our bodies, our thoughts, our feelings, when friction comes along, it doesn't, quote unquote, it doesn't rub us the wrong way. If you practice meditation, it's one way to just get out of the way of the friction.
Yeah.
The Tai Chi person just flows with the energy. They're not in friction to it at all.
you were just mentioned about having two type of friction, that is the positive one and the negative one. And I thought that since doesn't that I mean it's not that black and white, some friction that comes like with the first impression as negative, and then it turns out slowly to be positive, and those positive and turn out slowly to be negative. And so that it's not all the time like leave me alone and give me the space when it's negative. But sometimes it's yeah, it's transforming like a blade, yeah, like a blade
A knife blade.
to become sharper with the friction. But it really depends on whether the blade, the steel, the piece of steel wants to become a blade or not. Right? So if you
Yes.
don't blade, then leave me alone. That tough, that rough texture. But if you do want to become a blade, then you do have to accept the friction.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Remember, there is no bad friction or good friction. There's only friction. It's how we identify with it, how we label it, the effect that it has on us, that we decide whether it's good or bad. So yeah, a really bad situation, and we've all been through it, is when it in the beginning it looks terrible, and after time you say, wow, you know, maybe what it was that looked so terrible ended up saving my life. Now I interact with the friction in a completely different way, based on my mind. How do I see it now? There's only friction. We give it the negative or the positive label. The knife is only steel. Not good steel, bad steel. You know, in the Renaissance time in Europe, when they had perfected the craft of making these incredible swords. Same thing in Orient. You know, the Japanese, the samurai had their swords that were so perfect. Right? In the West, the swords, like in Renaissance, they were the straight sword with a sharp edge on both sides. That was used in mysticism as a very important symbol. And it showed exactly that, is a knife can cut both ways. It can kill you and it can save your life. It's how you use it. Friction is the same thing. Friction just is friction. It's
It can kill you.
How we wield it.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said. You said the
Knife, right? The medieval swords, they had two cutting edges, one on each side, right? And it wasn't
Okay.
just physically, it might have been so they could make two swipes and kill two people at the same time, right? But the symbolism of it was that a knife, a sword, has two sides. One side used by the surgeon will save your life. The other side used by the warrior will take your life. It's just a knife. It has no inherent good or bad qualities to it. You decide to make it good or bad. And even that can be still relative, right? If you turn the knife into a sword and say, okay, that's negative, and you kill me with it, it's, oh, terrible, she should go to prison. Now, 500 years from now, you might find out that I was going to give birth to a child who was the absolute worst thing to happen to the planet. And 5 years later, you say, thank God somebody killed me. I'm making an exaggeration to share the point. That even in the moment that we choose whether it's a negative or a positive friction, or a negative or a good or a bad knife, we still don't ultimately know what it is. But in the moment, we deal with it in one way or another. It just is friction. It just is a knife. Got it? Yeah? Make sense?
Yep.
So yeah, since you pointed out, you made some good points. Just remember that we are, in essence, okay, if a wind is blowing and I'm standing outside, there's a physical level of friction. That's a certain quotient of friction. If I don't like the wind, now I have an emotional friction, more friction. And if I start thinking as the friction is going to blow my house down that I just finished building, now I have a mental friction too. So I've ramped up the friction. We can deal with each level of friction. Sometimes you just need to get out the physical. But this works for all three levels of friction. Lesson. Even in the world of marketing, they understand this principle. There's a pyramid in marketing when you're trying to market a new product. Is you have physical friction, mental friction, and emotional friction. And they develop a product and how to market the product based on friction. The physical friction, they need to solve user-friendly issues. The flip phone wasn't as good as an iPhone because it took more physical energy. And maybe you only had one hand free, right? So they invented the iPhone. That was dealing with physical friction. And they sold a lot of iPhones. Right? Then there's the mental friction. The ease of change. If I make your life easier, emotionally, you're going to buy my product. Then there's the mental one. Is if it's so mentally complicated, when I was in high school, I wanted to quit math because I had a teacher that drove me crazy. And they said, you need math to be able to learn computer code. And without computer code, without knowing, you're going to be a zero in this life. You're going to go nowhere. And I said, I don't care, please. The teacher driving me, just let me drop out of math. And then let me drop out of math. Who in the world now, except developers, knows code? Why? Because somebody invented an operating system. It's COBOL, Fortran, all these things, right? Somebody used very simple, language-friendly user languages. I don't think anybody amongst you has had a teacher that said you have to learn code if you want to be successful in this life. They'll say you need to learn OS X, right? Or you need to learn Windows. Right? That's the mental friction that they resolved, and they sold. They made billions. It's the same thing, just applied to. Instead of applied to a physical world, we apply it to your spiritual world. It works in both. It exists in both.
That's really interesting that you mentioned that. I read a book in January about design. I can't remember the name of the author, but it talked about how, even a chair, for example, how chairs have been designed differently through the years because human beings were just not comfortable, like having to push a chair. And so now you've got all these new designs where you can see and you have, space for your neck and bend back. And it connects with what you just said.
Yeah. Let me interrupt 1 second. everything from you. Tin needs to go. I see her. I see the friction building up in her. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for sharing. It helps. It's a very new vocabulary to explain my some of the mechanism that I adopt in my daily life. My infamous saying to my friend is that when you walk, come in. When you walk around and see a piece of shit, you turn around. You don't walk to that. When you see the shit over there, you don't go that direction. You're gonna turn another direction to just not even smell the shit, so that you protect. And,
Absolutely.
that's the nice thing of
Even when I'm talking about friction, I'm still talking about self-awareness. It's still doing the work of knowing yourself better and knowing the world better. Same. It's all part of the same thing. Have a good lunch.
Bye. Nice to meet you.
Take care.
Bye.
Maria. Sorry for the interruption. Yes.
No, don't worry.
What
I
is it?
also think,
Go ahead.
yeah, I also think that sometimes we feel negative friction when we are faced with situations that we have not been faced before, but the situation is not necessarily negative. Just an example, when I first moved to Vietnam, I was living in Binh Thanh, and I had a rat in my apartment. And so the rat would appear at night, and I would freak out. And obviously there was friction between the rat and myself, and I was obviously trying to get out of the apartment because I didn't want to face the situation, and then I didn't want to face the rat. But it was simply because I had never had a rat in my apartment before. Yeah, and so sometimes when I'm faced with with a person that's completely new to me in terms of personality, I tend to freak out a bit. But it's simply, okay, well, you've never talked to a person with this personality, and so I try to also calm down. And when you mentioned before, be the observer in the situation, be an observant. So I do that, and I'm like, okay, well, this person is not as bad as you thought it was at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, perfect. Great example. Friction becomes negative primarily out of fear or pain. Friction becomes negative when we're coming at it from what we call negative emotions. Change your emotions and you'll see the friction differently. Maybe you take it. Tim was just using the example of when you're walking the road and you see a pile of shit, you turn around, so you don't have to smell it and you don't step in it. That's an excellent coping mechanism for stopping the friction. Another option is to say, I use this all the time. I said, what's another word for shit? Anybody here can say what another word for shit is?
BC.
What?
BC. BC.
You're breaking in and out. Did you say disease?
BC or feces. I think that's a scientific word.
Oh, okay. Oh, feces.
Yeah.
Okay, what's another word?
Stool.
Stool. Okay. What's another word?
Dookie.
Dookie. Okay. Anybody jump in? Just keep throwing out words.
Crap.
Crap. Okay. Another word.
Dumb. I don't know. Dump is
Okay.
actually.
Okay, another word. Keep going. Just throw them out.
Brick.
What?
Kaka.
Okay.
Brick.
Okay, let's stop there, okay? I heard maybe, what,
Sure.
12 different names?
Yeah.
Nobody said fertilizer.
Hmm.
Where's your thinking? Is your thinking wrapped up in negative thoughts? Or are you open-minded? That's a real simple one. How come we think of all the names that are negative? Shit is life. Without shit, we don't have plants that grow and feed us. Without shit, we don't have anything to wake us up and say, oops, I'm doing something inappropriate. Shit is just shit. But we label it negative or positive based on our belief system. If your belief system is shit is just bad, then we just come up with a list of bad words.
What do you think is funny, not even good or
I've got some real problem here breaking up. You
Yeah.
guys?
Someone's. I don't know who's. Is it mine or?
so I think maybe
Can't hear you, Nick.
I'm like, if you think that poop is like not good or bad, just something funny too.
Poop is nothing until you identify it as poop, and then you go in your memory bank and you define it and you categorize it.
That's why you said that words are.
That's like I think because I'm so immature, so like the word poop is not like bad or good, it's something silly and funny to say.
It's conditioning, right?
Yeah.
It's learned.
It's your conditioned mind speaking.
To think poop is funny.
Think if you're a little kid in Ethiopia and you have nothing to eat. That kid might look at shit and saying, you know, the cow walks by, dumps a little shit on the road. That kid might say, food. As disgusting as it is to us, right? He might look at it as saying, wow, I get to eat for a day. What's the difference? Attitude, condition.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
So
know-
when
Go ahead.
when we become more open-minded, so like the attempt to be open-minded, what does that do to our ego immediately? Like a reaction of, because I'm thinking in a group of people, if and they are channeling the conversation towards talking about someone in a negative form, and then I'm just being open-minded and saying, hey, we never look at it in this perspective. And then I open myself to that conversation and I just get blasted because everybody agreed with the rhetoric, you know, with whatever we are talking about. But I chose to be a little bit open-minded. I think, yeah, it's like kind of being a neutral judge. You know, you have to look at the devil's advocate, both sides of the
Yes.
spectrum. And I feel like those people that always say the opposite in terms, they being open-minded, get hated more, especially in an open, for example, I'll give an example like maybe Donald Trump for that matter, or our president. Right now, South Africa is going through some real concerns, and everybody's blaming the president. They're talking about his weakness. They're talking about his lack of urgency. They're talking about his leadership. Everything is just negative. So, and when he gives his speech to the country about, because we're on level 4, level 5 lockdown, then there was looting. So there's a whole lot of stuff that happened. And you can see when he gives the speech to the country, he's drained physically. And people are not concerned about him talking about taking care of each another, being kind to each another, doing things that we're supposed to do in the they don't want to listen to all the stuff that they already know. And he's getting torn apart, and physically you can see he's rinsed. And some people are trying to find compassion, but there's no compassion. And now the people are doing the work, and rather than the government doing the work right now. So I'm at the stage where what do I feel? And I'm getting taught the stuff. Okay, first of all, we shouldn't judge, but I'm only human, you know? And most of me wants to blame him.
Remember, you're not even human.
I'm not even human, yeah. Yeah.
That's the point, the whole thing. Your mind is very human.
So when I take this practical example of what we're going through, because he holds such a big post, and every decision he makes has a reaction to the country, has an outcome for the country. So judgments are going through my mind, first of all. And I want to look at something positive. I want to say something, I want to feel neutral, but I can't. Cannot.
Who can't feel neutral?
Yeah.
Who? Answer the question. Who can't feel neutral? You? Is it you? Really?
It's not me.
Who is
Sure.
it? It's the ego that you call
Ego,
I.
for sure.
Right?
So
No problem.
Immediately it dilutes that ego as soon as you have this open-mindedness.
Well, and you'll test the strength of your ego. Right?
Yeah.
Because it'll come back. That leader that you're talking about, how long has he been fighting this fight? How long has he been looking so tired, but he's still doing it?
Man. Since coronavirus.
I would say if he keeps doing that, he sounds like he's probably truly an open-minded person. An open-minded person is the one that has the strength to hold still in the adversity.
No doubt.
By understanding where the other side, so quote unquote, is coming from. The closed-minded person rebels against it and stops. The closed-minded person says, it's either my way or the highway. If you don't like it, then I leave. Or I kick you out. But it sounds like he's truly an open-minded person. He hangs in for the betterment of, it sounds like it's not a big benefit to him, but it's a benefit to the country.
Yeah, the country just wants to see results. That's all. That's ego, I guess.
So he's in service to the country. That's not, unless he's in service to the country to get reelected, right? To maintain his power, he'll do whatever he takes.
Yeah.
But it sounds like he's really coming from that place of less ego and more service.
Yeah, thanks for that. Still a reminder.
You know, I now that I mentioned about the sword, in my first teacher, you know, we had these workshops that I told you about, and I was there for 12 years on staff. And in the I think it was in the second training. It was the first simple one, more advanced, much more advanced. In the second one, at the end of it, we had a ceremony. He was very much into ceremonies, not for the ceremony, but for the symbolism of what the ceremony represented. And in this one, he had a table, and the only thing I remember on the table was something else. He had a beautiful sword in a sheath, right, in its holder, and he put it down on the table. And each person came to the front of the room and picked up the sword. And the object was that either you said, I will live by sword, and you pull it out of the sheath, or you just hold the sheath and say, usually we say, I choose not to be partake in any way of violence. I cannot pull the sword. The other one was saying, I pull the sword when it's time to save a life and when it's time to take a life. Sometimes it's justified, both. I'll live by the sword, both healing and both positive and negative. Some couldn't let go of their belief system about violence. And that a lot of that training was about really look at your belief system and can you come from the center and see where every belief is valid someplace on the circle. It doesn't mean that you have to choose to stand on that place, but it means when there is somebody on that place, you validate their point of view. Now, if they kill somebody and you're in a society, unjustly, they kill somebody, you validate their point of view, but you still take them to court. Because you're not taking them to court because you hate them and their point of view. You're taking them to court because the system says when you do A, you get B. What he was doing, what he was hoping is that everyone would take the sword out of the sheath and say, I only see sword. I can see both edges of the sword. And I accept them. Doesn't mean I'm going to live with both of them. It doesn't mean I'm going to randomly use both of them. But I see both sides of the story. Very powerful. Until you can see both sides of the story, you are completely suckered into your ego. And your ego is going to say, no, 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 no. You just go by this side. This side is good, this side is bad. And you won't live a full life. To be whole, you need to be able to embrace both. But you need to be able to embrace everything. It's a very powerful teaching. And you can't get there as long as you think you know how the world should be. If you stand in the middle of the circle and you can see and validate all points of view, you have a clear picture of the world. And then you can make your judgments how to respond to the world from a much healthier place than if you're standing over here at 1 point out of 360 points. If I see the world from 280 points, I'm much more aware than if I see it from 1 point. And if I see it from 360 points, I'm still even more aware. My choices will be much better for the world because I understand what's going on. Here, I only understand what I want to see. And everything else is bad. I have to stop everything else. Any comments? If not, I'll close with one other story for just a couple minutes. Anybody want to say anything or add anything? I'm open. There's no time limit. I say 10 to 12, but if you want to keep going a little bit longer, it's fine. If you have nothing else to say, then I'll give you this story and that'll be up to us.
Before your story, I think it was last week or the week before. we're talking about being totally present. And you, if I heard correctly, you said the awareness of the presence of awareness is knowing everything around you. Is that correct? Because
Say that again. Say it
okay,
again.
so like knowing everything around you when you're totally present.
Okay, I remember
Yeah.
Jackie
It's-
Chan
Yes.
and Bruce Lee.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Because I made a comment that when my uncle, my father's friend basically, he when he's in the garden, he's totally lost. But then you said he wasn't present. Being lost in the garden means you're not present, right? I think kind of like alluded to that. Sorry, I'm paraphrasing, but being lost in something may not necessarily mean that you're present.
It has two meanings. You have
Okay.
to know which one you're coming from. One is you're lost. Like if you walk into the garden, he won't even know you're there.
Ah,
That's one. Right? That we could say that's a negative lost. The other one is I'm lost in my garden. Means I've given up me that I identify as me. I'm no longer my body, my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, my sensations. I am the garden. I've lost me, I've become the garden. From that point, if you walk into the garden, I will know. I will know everything in the garden. The other one, I know nothing in the garden because I'm completely someplace else. I'm lost.
I got you.
My awareness is lost. The second one is my awareness is very much tuned in. And I have lost what I call myself in the garden, and I have merged with the garden.
I got you.
That's a good one. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a good one to start. Any other comments? Okay. Going back to the story with my teacher and the sword. The important thing was we need to get off the circle. If I'm at this point in the circle, I identify this is me, this is my beliefs, this is everything. In fact, this is the way it should be. Anything beyond, maybe the one next to me on both sides, I can say, okay, close enough. But the one across the way is an enemy. If I come from that point, I'm going to get wrapped up in anger, hate, envy, greed, jealousy, fear, pain, suffering, right? If I step in the middle of the circle, I have a spot that I like that my personality fits with, that my beliefs fit with, that my way of interacting in the world fits with. But I'm standing in the middle of the center, and I'm going to listen to every point of view and not invalidate any of it. And this is from an existential point, right? When I'm in the middle, I don't suffer. Anger doesn't come up, greed doesn't come up, jealousy doesn't come up. And especially now going back to friction, a couple of things don't come up anymore. And those are primarily fear, anger, hate. If the friction is bad enough, right, it turns into those over all the others. Now, there's a Zen story that a long time ago in Japan. There were two kingdoms that were at war for 30 years. Both had very powerful kings. Both were great warriors. And the kings were in the battles. They didn't sit back and let the other people take care of it. And they fought for 30 years, almost nonstop. One day they had the big showdown. They met face to face. And they drew their swords and they were having a battle between the two kings. And the one king knocked down the other king. And when the other king fell to the ground, he lost his sword. So he's now helpless on the ground. And the other king is standing above him with his sword, ready to stick it through his heart and finish this battle. And as he leaned forward to the king on the ground and raised his hand to strike, the king on the ground spat in the eye of the other king holding the sword. Now, you and me, if he did that to us, we'd get angry and we'd stab him extra hard. Right? The king holding the sword got up off his knees, put his sword in his scabbard, and stopped everything he was doing. And the other king was in shock. And he just sat up still on the ground and he said, "We've been warring for 30 years. You had the chance to kill me. Why didn't you?" And the king who had the sword said, "I vowed to stand for an ideal, stand for principle, and to defend that to my death. I have never stood for killing you because I hate you. When you spat in my eye, I became aware of anger coming up to me. And if I put the sword through your heart, it would be anger putting the sword through your heart." He turned around and walked away. And then he stopped and he said, "I'll see you tomorrow. And the war will continue," because the war was about a principle. Right? The war was about an ideal of a nation, not about hatred. When you're on a point on the circle, you get wrapped up in hatred or fear, which becomes hatred, to something that is opposed to you. These two were opposing forces. But that king in that moment, he stood in the center and he said, I will take your life for an ideal, because the ideal is much bigger than me. But I won't take your life out of my pitiful anger. That's why we stand in the center. We see it from all points of view. And when we do that, the anger and the hatred, they fall away. Because we understand everything. Because we see, like the circle B that you were just talking about, I'm aware, I know everything. I may not know the objects of the circle, but I know what the circle is. I know everything. I know the reality of the circle. And the reality is all, not just one part. I love that story.
Similar with like Nelson Mandela's story, right?
Yeah, it would fit. Sure. Nelson Mandela would definitely be the kind of person who would do it. When he left prison, he said, if I don't leave my anger behind, I'll still be in prison. Being in the center of the circle is really what non-dualism is all about. Because being in the center of the circle means you see all 360 degrees and you're aware of what the circle is and what the circle is not. In fact, you're just awareness. You're lost in the circle. You become the circle. So every point is understandable and knowable. When I'm on the circle and I'm in my garden and I'm lost, and you walk in the garden and I don't even know you're there, it's because I'm on a point in the circle and I'm lost to 360 59 other points of view, other realities, I'm lost. When I stand in the middle of the circle, I'm lost in the circle. I have dissolved. I am now the circle. And I understand and I know everything. And I will respond to the circle for the good of the circle. Thanks for reminding me of that one. It's a great application. That's the difference between being lost and being lost at and being lost in.
Mm.
Make sense?
I think my biggest takeaway from today was the conditioning part where people test us, different people, and my reaction to it. Obviously,
Yeah.
the I part.
You said two things that are really important. Is one, people, how did you say it? People test them.
Yeah, it's like a test.
Is it people who are testing you? Or is it life that's testing you?
It's life. It's life.
That person is your teacher.
That's it.
That person isn't testing you. Life through your ego is testing you.
True. A cat can test you.
So you said people are testing me, and the second one was
Presence. Being present. Yeah.
no, second was two takeaways. One was people test me, and
The present
reaction.
reaction.
Reaction. Right? When you're lost at the circle, right, on the outline of the circle, you react. You react out of memories, feelings, emotions. You react out of the past. You bring the past forward, and you react. When you're lost in the circle, you respond to the circle as the circle.
Correct.
There's no reaction. You know, when a drop of water hits a glass of water, the water in the glass moves to absorb it. Right? When a drop of water hits a brick, the water shatters. Because the water is, the brick is not of water. The drop and the glass of water, and the water in the glass are both water. That's the complete circle. The circle responds to the drop by accepting it. The brick is another circle for comparison. When something not of the world hits another world that it doesn't belong in, it's not of, it becomes lost at the world of the brick. And it shatters. If the brick, you understand, you follow what I'm saying. This is all an example, right? The brick is a world, and the water is a world. The water drop is welcomed and absorbed in the glass of water. There's a response. In the brick world, if the water drop invades it and drops on the brick, it splatters everywhere and it gets upset. How dare you do that to me? I am just a peaceful drop of water. Why did you reject me? Why did you treat me that way? There's a reaction of the water drop of disappointment, anger, pain, hurt, whatever it is, right? Because it's not of, it's at the world of the brick. It's not of the world of the brick. Understand? Now, in the big scheme of life, right, everything is in that circle we call life. If you stand in the middle, there's nowhere where you can, In fact, life is the universe, and the universe is the cosmos, and the cosmos is awareness. Right now, here we're back to the non-dualism part. And Maria, if you have questions about these, you and I can talk about it. Let's go back to awareness. The real I, which is awareness, is of the world of awareness. There's no differentiation. So when I fall from the sky, awareness absorbs me. And you can't even find the drop anymore, can you? It's just awareness. It was awareness before the drop, and it was awareness after the drop. No difference. You can't find any difference. Remember, it's the unlimited awareness. So it's not like in a glass where you say, well, we see the level of the water raise up. It's just awareness. Awareness responds to awareness. In the physical world, in the dualistic world, where we have all these limitations, you have the brick world, the water world, the boss world, the wife world, the sick world, all these worlds, right? And we bounce around between them as an individual that has an opinion of the world that doesn't fit in most of the worlds. It only fits in my little world. So I'm going to react all over the place. I can't respond because I'm not lost in that world. I'm not of that world. So my ego reacts instead of my heart responds. If I can make it simple like that. As long as we identify with the body-mind in this apparent world, then we're stuck reacting. Our instinct is to react. Because our instinct is to draw on our animal way of behaving. When I'm lost in the world, when I'm lost in awareness, there is no reaction. There's only response. And the response is always in accord with awareness. Because awareness, if awareness is unlimited, where can it reject awareness any place? There is no possibility of rejection. And reaction is a form of rejection. Respond is a form of inclusion. I'm a water drop in a brick world. I'm a separate identity, and I'm going to react because the world is not going to work the way that I expect it to work. Because my expectation is from the point on the circle of water world. So I'm going to react all the time, and I'm going to let everything that's not on this point, or maybe the few points right close to me where I can tolerate, I'm going to react, and I'm going to have problems. And I'm going to create friction. But when I step back and say, I'm not my body, I'm not my mind, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my emotions, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my memories. I am the center of pure consciousness, awareness. Where's the threat? The infinite cannot, there is no place, in the infinite, there is no place to be rejected to. You can't fall out of infinite. Otherwise, infinite wouldn't be infinite.
Can you say that one last time, please?
About the infinite and the
Yeah.
reaction. Yeah.
The
In the non-dual teachings, right? I'm going to give you a 30-second definition, right? And then you're going to talk more about it later. The non-dual teachings basically say the world that appears to you is not the real world. It exists, but it's not real. The you have always believed yourself to be, your body, your mind, your thoughts, your memories, your feelings, your emotions, your maleness or femaleness, your humanness or animalness, you're a good citizen or bad citizen, you're a smart student or dumb student. All of those you've made into an identity you call I. Non-dualism, you say none of those are you. Those are all things that show up in the outer world that are not of you. You are what's called the substratum. You are at the foundation. You are at where this world that appears to exist, where it comes out of. And when it dies, where it will return to. Non-dualism is saying you're not all those thoughts, all those labels. You are awareness itself. That's why in all spiritual traditions, the esoteric, the deep down teaching is you're never born and you never die. Even in Christianity, they have a very roundabout way of saying that Jesus was crucified and he resurrected, proving the point. So if you are awareness, and awareness, we go back and back and back until we negate. Say, okay, I'm really not my body. I'm really not he. That's a name that was given to me. I'm not an American. That's just a place I was born. In fact, I was I before I was even born. When I was in my mother's womb, I, the real I, still existed. In fact, the I still existed before my mother and father had sex. And their mother and father, and their mother and father, and their mother and father. You get the chain of events, Maria?
Yeah.
So I can't identify where I began, really. In the physical, I say, well, I still existed in potentiality in my great grandmother, and maybe even if you're religious, you can go back to I existed in Adam, which is why the Bible says we're paying for the sins of Adam, because we are Adam. In the non-physical part of it, where non-dualism says you are not part of this world. You have a body that functions in this world. You have thoughts that function in this world, but you are not of this world. You, the real you, is pure awareness. But you've forgotten that. In the process of birth, and maybe some say in the process of going through the birth canal, the friction, the shock, makes us forget all that we knew before. But I want to go back to, you are, in essence, pure awareness, undivided. It's not your awareness and P's awareness and my awareness. It's just awareness. It shows up through P and you and I. Just like if you hold a flashlight to a piece of paper with 3 holes in it, right? And you're on the other side of the paper, there's 3 holes. But is it 3 lights? No, there's just 1 light. We appear as a hole in the paper. The reality is we're the light, undivided. The light is undivided until it hits the piece of paper with 3 holes in it. And that light is pure awareness. And pure awareness, you can't find anything beyond or behind awareness. Therefore, awareness must be infinite and must be eternal. And guess what? That means you are infinite and eternal. That's the teaching of what non-dualism is talking about. It's the realization that we are not who we think we are, that what we are truly is pure awareness. But you can't experience that through me explaining it. You can't learn it in a book. You have to do the process of the teachings of non-dualism, called the direct path, to discover for yourself that, wow, I'm just awareness. Then you know, but then you won't be able to tell anybody else what it is either. So I lost what your original question was in defining non-dualism. You wanted me to explain it for what purpose? You had a question about the last thing that I said.
Sorry.
You had a question about the last thing that I said. I explained non-dualism, but I want to respond
Oh,
to your
no,
question.
you mentioned you were talking about infinite
Yes.
something, and I couldn't hear that part.
Okay. Did you hear it now?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments? I think this is a really good place to stop for today. Thank you for joining. Maria, thank you for being here for the first time. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Your energy is a part of this world of our Zoomcast. I hope you'll come back again, but I have no interest.
I will.
If you don't come back, it's okay. But my ego says I hope you'll come back.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I really,
You're very
really
welcome.
enjoyed it. Is this every week?
Yes, every Sunday, same time. Think about it as 10 o'clock from now on, because you're an on-time person. Don't come. You come between 10 and 10:05. It's cool.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, guys. Thank you,
Bye.
guys. See you.